everybody. How are you? Sorry about that. You would have loved the behind the scenes scene tonight. Wasn't so much a technical difficulty as it was just my own clumsiness. I'd put this headset on and I didn't realize how incredibly long this cord is. And I had, it was my desk chair rolled over it and kind of trapped it. And when I went to move towards my computer, I did one of these because it pulled my head. uh, he had to be there, I guess. Anyway, great to see everybody this evening. Got lots of cool nature stuff in the lineup for you. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the slideshow? There we go. All right, so this past week I wrote about something that I think we've all been thinking about these last few weeks. I know we've certainly, uh, it's been surrounding us whether we've been aware of it or not. I wrote in the column how I was just from the very early days of my starting out in this field back in the early 2000s, the date of October 15th is peak color was kind of drilled into my brain. That's when we tried to schedule school groups. That's when we did fall color programs. That's when we knew that by then we'd usually have had a frost and the internal biology of the tree was driving it towards its winter preparations. Well, this year, a friend of mine used this term and I just loved it. This is the year of the stubborn chlorophyll. It just kept producing. Now, if we review a little bit about what goes on inside of a leaf, the leaf is the food factory for the tree. The reason it's green is because of a pigment called chlorophyll, and chlorophyll, when it's exposed to sunlight, and it has the ability to make the food for the plant. It allows the reaction that takes the carbon dioxide and water, the carbon dioxide from the air and water. You put that together, you get C6H12O6, which are carbohydrates, simple sugars. And it's what pretty much, I shouldn't say every, but most of the plants on Earth use chlorophyll to make the food for themselves, and then a lot of them are able to make food for us and a lot of other creatures. So the warm temperatures that we've had throughout the fall, extraordinarily warm. We're talking 10 degrees and more above what would be considered the average for the state. They've allowed the chlorophyll to continue this process. This photo, it was taken on October 21st, which is super rare. This is an oak tree over at Fearson Creek Park. When I looked around, I thought, well, I'll take a picture of a green leaf. Let me see if I can find, a tree that's got a lot of green leaves. And then I started looking around. This was the view up the Fox River. Sure, we've got a little bit of color that was starting at that time, but we weren't anywhere near peak. Now, since October 21st, and really within the last couple of days, we've started to see some cooler temperatures, a little bit cooler than average, they're now saying. We've had a frost. What's going on inside the tree? If we're able to peel away the different layers, we've got our outer bark, which provides our protection, and we've got our heartwood, which is really that's all past years living tissue, and that's what provides the stability for the tree to stand up. But then we've got all these vascular layers that allow the food and the water, the food that's being made by the leaves, to get sent down to the roots or move throughout the tree, and the xylem, which is the part of the interior that drives the water sucks the water up from the roots and brings it up to the leaves to make that uh, food making possible. So when it's warm out, these vascular tissues they just keep moving. They just keep moving the fluids up and down, and the tree carries on as if it's normal. Now, day length does start to play a role in the tree's ability to photosynthesize. As the days get shorter, there is less exposure to sunlight. But temperature has played a big role in allowing our trees to stay green, and so they have. People were asking me, so once we get the fall color, is it going to stay? I can't say for sure, but I suspect it's going to be kind of a brief show this year because it is inevitable that things are going to get colder. Once the tree ceases to produce chlorophyll and the chlorophyll ceases to produce food, it fades away. And some trees have yellow pigment underneath. Other trees have deeper redder pigments that start to form from sugars that are left in the leaf. Um, those colors will be there, first on the tree and then on the ground after the tree forms what's called its abscission layer or section where it kind of cuts off the the water flow out to the leaf and the nutrient flow back in. The abscission layer or that abscission starts to just, you know, it's the first step in getting the leaf to let go and drop. So I have a feeling that it's not going to last real long this fall. Of course, we've still got a few more weeks to go before we call it winter, but yeah, that's what's going on. It's the year of the stubborn chlorophyll. Now, I know I don't have to mention this to this crowd too much, but we talked briefly about it in the past. Leaving the leaves. I was on a walk yesterday at a really cool park in Iowa that we'll talk more about next week. But I started looking down and noticing white spots on leaves. Now, a couple of white spots were white splotches of whitewash from, I'm going to guess an owl, maybe a hawk, but there were an awful lot of these sorts of things, little bits of web on leaves. And it was really, my gosh, it was one and then another and another and another. Um, Leaving the leaves, when that term is being used, there's a lot of different environmental groups that are using that. They're talking about saving the pollinators. They're focusing on things like caterpillars and the chrysalis of butterflies, maybe the cocoons of some of our beautiful moths. And they sort of have left spiders out of the picture, but spiders rely heavily on leaves to carry on their next generations. Try this yourself. The next time you're out walking around, you see a lot of leaves on the ground. Do a little spider census yourself and see how many of these. These are all, by the way, egg cases surrounded by silk. We've talked in the past how spiders are able to create lots and lots of different types of silk. Probably at least six or seven, and two of them are in use here. The silk that binds the eggs together, and then the protective, really weatherproof silk that covers up above it, around it, and makes it weatherproof throughout these coming months. So yeah, have a little fun with that. And also, I don't know, as you're driving around, I know this was probably not 100% legal, but I did snap a picture the other day when I was waiting at what seemed to be a really long stoplight. I looked at what was in front of me. Look at all this wonderful organic material. This brown stuff, this was all some kind of conifer needle. They looked pretty long, so I'm going to guess they were pine needles. Um, and all this stuff was just getting carted away to who knows where. Whatever might have been living in it might have gotten blown away by a leaf blower. But it just made me a little bit sad to see that sitting there and knowing all the tremendous amount of um, some even microscopic life, but also just the little creatures that form the balance in our yards. So anyway, leave the leaves if you can. I know the critters would appreciate it. Now, also, as we're crawling around on the ground, or maybe you're not crawling, maybe you're just walking, but looking around, we have talked week after week after week about the different types of fungus that are just really enjoying this injection of moisture that we've had these last few weeks. And I thought it would be good to share a couple of websites that really aren't focused so much on the eating of mushrooms, but on the identification of mushrooms. Mushroomexpert.com by Michael Coe. He really does an excellent job of conveying descriptions of mushrooms. There's actually a whole lot of different parts to this website, but it and you by looking at these different pages, you can get a sense for all the different parts that need to be taken into consideration. You can't just look at the top of it and say, oh, that's this genus or this species. And sometimes you can't even look below it and know for sure whether it's got pores, as we see on this mushroom here on the left, or right above it if it's got gills. Sometimes you actually need to make a spore print and see what color comes out of those gills or those pores. And even then, there's a lot of lookalikes. So it's just this is a really good website. I actually go to this more than I go to my printed mushroom field guide, because it's very helpful and is updated regularly as well. Look, up here in the top right, 1,200 plus mushrooms that you can key out. Now, this other website does make some reference as to edibility, and it's maintained by or was created by a fellow named Tom Volk. Now, I know Tom Volk had some health challenges, and frankly, I don't know him, and I don't know what his status is. And you see, a lot of these have not been updated recently, but it's a great website. He was doing a Fungus of the Month series that went on for several years, and those are fun to go back and look at as well. So those are two really helpful resources. If you just type into your search engine Tom Volk's fungi, it'll come up. It was administered through the University of Wisconsin at La Crosse, but that has led to a sort of a long and awkward web address. But Tom Volk's fungus, and then mushroomexpert.com with Michael Coe. Excellent resources that with this being the height of the mushroom season, you might want to go ahead and check out. All right, so this little creature has now what's he doing on this page? He's not supposed to be there. We're going to get back to him. This is what they call a teaser. All right, let's go to this instead. Poor Herrick bird. A few weeks ago, actually October 26th, I received an email with the subject, "Look what I found." And I have to tell you, if there's anything on this earth that focuses my concentration, it's an email with that sort of subject. Just a little hint, if you ever want to hear back from me, do that. Otherwise, emails come in such large quantities, my eyes glaze over and I don't get to them very quickly. But something like this, I want to see, wow, what was it? What did you find? Well, this was all it said. I know you can tell me what this is. So now this adds a little element of pressure. And what it was a skull. So let's look at this together. It's a bird skull, and that upper mandible there has quite a sharp curve to it. There were actually several photos in the email. There was this one. This one shows kind of the what would be the top of the mouth. We're looking at it now from underneath, and then this shows the lower mandible. So it was a fairly complete skull. There was actually a little bit that had broken off here right above the bill, but if we go back to this one with that sharp curve, I'm thinking probably bird of prey. The location of the nares or the nostrils here, this sharp curve. So some sort of bird of prey. But what's missing from all of these pictures? It's a sense of scale. So I wrote back and I said, hey, could you add something? Oh, I don't know, maybe a coin or hey, a lip balm that might help to give us a better sense of the size. So guess what? Here's the same creature with a lip balm. So standard for most of the common brands of lip balm, the standard of measure is 2 5/8 inches. So looking at where that skull measures on the lip balm, I thought, oh, now we can start to get some numbers here. We can draw a line here and we can draw a line here. We can see about where that would fall on that unbranded lip balm. And I can start to do a comparison to my own lip balm. So now this is all, wholly unscientific, but I think it's a pretty good guess. If we draw these lines, I came up with a figure of 57 millimeters. Well, there's a really another really cool resource I want to share with you here. This is called Avian Osteology, and it's a website that's maintained by the Royal BC or British Columbia Museum. And what you can do is if you find a skull of a bird of prey, you can measure it from front to back. Actually, I think they have different divisions. You can measure, take other measurements too. They actually have a whole instruction page here. But measuring from front to back, you come up with a length for the skull. And then as you go scroll down through this page, which is royalbcmuseum.bc.ca, it will give you a list of the species that have that skull measurement. So I scrolled down and used this 57 millimeter measurement, and I found that these were all the birds in North America that have 57 millimeter long skulls. The northern harrier, the Cooper's hawk, western screech, northern hawk owl, long-eared owl, and short-eared owl. So of those, for this area, we can rule out western screech and northern hawk owl. That leaves us with northern harrier, Cooper's hawk, long-eared, and short-eared owls. So from that, we can start to look at the pictures, and then we can also play a little bit of law of averages of those species, those 4 species. The Cooper's hawk is by far the most common. And remember how I said there were some pieces that were missing here? Oops. Right here is the Cooper's hawk, the one in the middle. I don't know my osteology terms, but the pieces in front of the eye, which I guess would be analogous to our cheekbones, those were missing from the bird. But I can't say with 100% confidence, and I did write the person back to say, hey, where exactly did you find this bird? Because that might clue us in a little bit more as to if we know the habitat, that would certainly help. But long-eared and short-eared owls, short-eared owls we see in the prairie in the winter. Long-eared owls we see in woods. They love conifers, but they're only here in the winter. The northern harrier is also called a marsh hawk. It hunts in wetlands. So I'm gonna guess that our friend found a Cooper's hawk skull. If you find a skull like that and you'd like to go through a similar exercise, check out this website. It's really, really interesting to just kind of click through and familiarize yourself with these different parts of these skulls. And it's a really helpful resource should you find an artifact like this yourself. So now we're going to jump in the Wayback Machine, only we're not going to set it for very far back. This was a video I made this summer, and I think we shared it. I was probably complaining as I did show it to you. We'll turn. That's the sounds of downtown St. Charles that you don't need to hear. This is the bur oak tree out here in front of Good Natured World headquarters, and these are, bless their hearts, the little female gypsy moths that are flightless and are bound to their duty of laying eggs, which they do very, very prolifically, and then they die. So I actually this summer I collected a lot of the dead and dying females and gave them to a friend who has a gecko collection, leopard geckos, crested geckos, and these turned out to be a pretty good snack for that creature. So hopefully they, still had some eggs in them, and I maybe prevented a few of these egg cases from forming. But I don't know. There was an awful lot of gypsy moths out there this summer. I think the dryness combined with the heat that we had really did them a lot of good. So what we're left with now is a lot of the remains of their activity, a lot of egg cases. I received an email. I'm on a listserv, or that's the old term. What do we call it now? I get a lot of emails from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, and they sent out a reminder to people that this is the time of year to go after the gypsy moths, to examine the trees in your yard, see if you've got any of these masses, because if you do, you can do something about it. So August and September, they put this recommendation in, and I left it because of the warmth that we've had. We really had September weather up until very recently. So I don't know if these little wasps might still be active, but there is a parasitic wasp that does lay eggs in the eggs of gypsy moths. So as long as we've had weather above freezing, which until very recently we did, they say you can check for pinholes in the egg masses. I would imagine even after the frost, you can still see if those pinholes are visible. That's a good sign, and you want to leave those because the parasitic wasp is going to stay in that egg mass and feed on those gypsy moth eggs, and then those what we're doing is creating free biological insect control by doing that. So check for the masses and check for the wasp. But as we get into the later months, it's time for us to take over and destroy the egg masses, destroy them. The website at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources actually listed a couple of different things. The first one I'm a little leery of. It says to destroy them by spraying them with horticultural oil labeled for gypsy moth egg masses. You know, spraying some, the conditions have to be right. Even if you're just squirting something from a spray bottle, you don't want to miss your target and hit something else. You don't want to get the oil on your hands. My preferred method is actually the second thing they say to do, which is to scrape those egg masses off. It's really important, though, that when you scrape them off, you don't just scrape them and let them fall. They advise scraping them into a jar of soapy water. If it doesn't end there, let them soak for 2 days before discarding them in the trash. Don't try to compost them or figure that they're going to be food for something else at that point. Even if they're you just don't want to take any chances that you've missed any of those eggs. Scraping, and I've struggled with this because some of the egg masses on the tree out in front are up kind of high, and so I've been standing on my tippy toes with a butter knife and scraping, and I can see that I've left some behind. You really want to make sure you scrape down to the bark. Don't scrape into the bark. You don't want to actually damage the tree, but you want to get every trace of these egg masses off of the tree because even just a few eggs left behind could still be viable and still create next year's caterpillars. This was a photograph I took in May of this year. These things, they really do have an incredibly high reproductive rate. And since we had a lot of females producing egg masses this year, I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of caterpillars next year. So the more we can get rid of now, the better. So check your trees and see. And if you don't have any, maybe you can come over here and help me check our tree. Because, and I also actually heard that Mount St. Mary's park here in downtown St. Charles had a lot of gypsy moth activity too. So if you don't have any in your own yard, but you want to do some good, maybe you could go and help out some of our local parks and scrape some of those egg masses away so we can say goodbye to our friend the gypsy moth, which I understand is undergoing a common name change because gypsy is a term that's now considered to be not favorable to the Romani people. So watch for that. There might be more news on a new name for our friend or enemy, actually, the gypsy moth. So here he is. Sneak previews back. Remember this animal here? This is the little white squirrel that was actually determined to be an albino. It lives up north of town, not too far from Primrose Farm off of Crane Road. And I have some friends that live up in that neighborhood, and they're pretty sure that this is the same squirrel. It's going into its third year now, which I think is just really remarkable for something that is so starkly white and does not blend in whatsoever for, well, even in our winter months, we did have a fairly decent snowfall last winter, but the months in that where we have our snowfall in this area are really, maybe 3 months. So the majority of the year, this thing does not camouflage well at all, and it's still managing to do just fine. This neighborhood does have a lot of oak trees. There's a lot of tree cavities. I suspect there's probably also a lot of bird feeders in the area, although in this particular yard, it forages only on the acorns that fall from the oak trees. So, just a little check-in with our albino squirrel friend north of town. It's still hanging in there, going into its third year in the area. So I think that's kind of cool. And then I got an email. This is from a reader of the column that lives up in Algonquin, and she's written me a number of times with questions about what's going on in her yard. And this was something that has been appearing regularly in her neighborhood. There was this photo, and this photo, and this photo. And they were posted on the app or the website. I'm not sure what you call it, but the Nextdoor community, and people were putting out their various guesses as to what they thought this white animal might be. The two leading guesses, and you guys probably have the same ones, were mink or skunk. I'm definitely leaning towards skunk. I can see where maybe some of these angles, the body looks more elongated, but if we go back to that first one, I don't think there's any doubt at all. A mink, if a mink had a tail like that and a body like that, I don't know. I don't know. Something dreadful would have had to have happened to it. Maybe it got electrocuted or something. That's a really puffy tail and a really puffed out body. Very, very skunk-like. But remember, mink and And skunks are part of the same family. They're both in the weasel family, so there are some resemblances there. We look at this face, you can almost see, amongst the white fur, there's a little bit of a trace of even whiter fur here on the forehead. The woman who wrote mentioned that as well, that there seemed to be some perhaps lighter or white colored markings amongst all the other whites. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting. So we've got this albino squirrel that's been hanging out now for 3 years north of town. We had that email a few weeks ago of a woman who thought she spotted a albino mink down near Batavia, and now we've got an albino skunk in Algonquin. Um, I don't know. I personally never am lucky enough to see any of these oddities, but I'm really grateful for the people who are out there and sharing their findings. But keep your eyes open too. You never know what you might spot in your own backyards. So I don't know how many of you compost, but I've been a fan now for several years of taking any organic matter that I have that's not, I should say, plant-based organic matter, not no fats, no animal fats, no bones or things like that. But the um, just the whole process of taking um, waste item that would otherwise, end up in a landfill um, that are, from my leftover food scraps and my leftover junk mail and turning it into soil. I just think it's the coolest thing. So I've been doing this now for, I don't know, I would say over 5 years, maybe more like 7 or 8 years. All I did was I took I bought a plastic garbage can and I drilled a bunch of, I think they're about half-inch holes around the sides and underneath it as well. And then I got a bungee cord for the lid so that I could turn the can on its side periodically, roll it back and forth to kind of get some air into the process, mix things up better. Um, One thing I never did was I never added any worms. Um, we have done vermicomposting classes here at the Park District. We used to have one of our nature program supervisors who was a big fan of buying composting worms and then keeping a little container of it in the kitchen where she could add food scraps. In fact, we even tried one summer with our summer camp kids. We had a worm bin and we would take their lunch scraps. What I found was that the worms could compost some of the scraps, but we had to be very careful that we didn't overburden them because they wouldn't be able to keep up. It's kind of a wet and mushy process, and if there's too many scraps in the bin and it's not allowed to, um, just kind of percolate on its own, we were using it, for education and stuff. Anyway, long story short, we ended up with a lot of fruit flies, with a lot of just really kind of messy things. So I never took that step of doing worm composting myself, but I was really surprised the other day when I looked in the bin and I found out I got worms. And these are the sort of worms that you would purchase. This was one of many, many worms that I found as I started poking around. You can see here, this is a mixture of some scraps of junk mail that looks like we've got that green over there. I think that was part of a cucumber. Um, just lots and lots of paper and when you read about the science of composting they talk about adding the greens or the hot materials and then the browns or the um, what we would use to help kind of slow the mixture down a little bit. It gets all terribly technical. I found I just put in some paper and my banana peels and the coffee grounds and tear up some junk mail, and the whole process just continues on its own. It does create a little bit of heat from time to time, which is kind of neat. And I'm wondering if that might have drawn the worms in as it started to get colder. But anyway, I've got all these worms now, and I got curious as to where they came from, and I learned a little bit about it is the composting worm is the red wiggler. It's got lots and lots of different names. Um, Eisenia fetida is the scientific name, and fetida is particularly appropriate because these worms do have an odor to them. I know when we had the composting bins at the nature center, we thought, oh, we've got all these worms, we can feed them to our turtles. We can feed them to the fish. The turtles and the fish, they wanted nothing to do with these worms because they do have kind of an odor to them, which must translate into a bad taste too. Which makes sense when you figure they live on uh, decaying organic matter. That's what they help further break down. Um, you can identify a red wiggler by its markings. They have these alternating bands here. There's the darker bands that are usually brownish. Sometimes there's a reddish cast, reddish brownish color to them. And then they've got these other lighter bands that are sometimes pinkish, sometimes yellowish. Um, this is a species of worm that's referred to as being epigeic, which epigeic action occurs in the topmost level of the soil. Um, which is generally the richest in organic matter. So it would make sense that they were there. I guess, I must have had them somewhere in my yard and they sort of over time, because I did not have these worms for many years in my compost. So they migrated over there. Maybe they came in. I do occasionally pull some weeds. There might have been some clumps of soil on the roots of those weeds that contain some of the eggs of the red wigglers. I don't know. That could have happened as well. But of course, they're not native. Most of our earthworms here in Illinois are not native. But I thought it was interesting. The red wiggler has been introduced across the globe. It's in every continent except Antarctica. This is a worm that's very easy to acquire online. You can send away from them if you want to start a worm composting bin of your own, but um, you might not have to do that if you have an outdoor. Um, you know, I gladly talk to any of you about my little garbage can composter. I really like it. It doesn't attract any attention from the neighbors. It doesn't attract any attention from the creatures that I know pass through the yard. The opossums, the skunks, the raccoons. Um, they don't bust into it, and they're not attracted to it because it's covered and inaccessible. So anyway, just a kind of a neat little examination of what's going on. And I'm looking forward. Look at that rich soil there. I'm looking forward to what's been made in that bin. Spreading that out in my yard and uh, helping all the plants grow. Oh. Um, Next thing, this was a Facebook post that was put up by the DuPage Forest Preserve District. This was, I believe, 2 weeks ago now. This was at Herrick Lake, which is on Butterfield Road in, I think they call that Wheaton. It's either Wheaton or Warrenville. Um, it's a ball python, and um, it's something we had one show up here in Kane County at a forest preserve last year. This is the sort of thing, and it can happen at any time of year, but it's usually the warmer weather months because people they let these things go and they think, oh, it'll be fine, and then it'll find some place to hide in the winter. A species like a ball python, which is from Africa, it's probably not going to find any place warm enough unless it's able to get into a structure somewhere. It's not going to find a place to survive, and it's going to die. That'll be bad for the snake, but it could also be bad for other creatures in that area. It's an exotic animal. It was kept in captivity. Chances are, if it was being kept by somebody that didn't care enough to rehome it and just let it go, it probably wasn't getting really great care anyway. It could be harboring pathogens or diseases that could make wild populations sick. Um, it's just not a good idea. But forest preserves and even our own parks here in St. Charles, people let stuff go. Remember this summer we had that Ackie monitor, the Australian lizard, that was we suspect was let go over at Mount St. Mary's, and showed up in downtown St. Charles. If you could pass the word to whoever you could engage in conversation when you're talking about animals, it might help plant a seed in their mind or help uh, them to pass the word around. It's just not cool. Now, looking at the snake, the question is, so how do we know if you're not into snakes, and that's fine. You don't have to be into snakes, but uh, to look at that snake and know that it doesn't belong. Well, let's first of all look at the officer who's holding it and look at the snake in relation to that officer. This is a really thick-bodied snake, um, and not at all typical of the snakes we have in this area. Our northern water snakes are probably our thickest bodied snake. That would probably be the species most likely to um, approach the ball python in terms of size and shape. But then you look at the markings, and immediately you'll see that there's a difference. The northern water snake has the bands and the blotches on its back, and a ball python. Let's look in a little bit further. This is we're going to refer here to Paul the Ball. He's our resident ball python at Hickory Knolls. Paul uh, lets us we can see up close here what the markings are. There's a lot of long lighter markings against the dark background. In fact, we like to say that Paul and lots of ball pythons, in fact, have little ETs, the extraterrestrial markings along the sides. We can also look at the scales. These animals have much smaller scales and much differently shaped scales than what we see on our native species. Um, they give the snake a kind of a almost glossy look. And then there's the head in relation to the neck. Very broad head and a very broad neck. Again, relative to the snakes that we tend to see around here. So keep your eyes open. We don't have in Illinois any sort of native python. So if you see something that looks pythonish, pythons and boas are closely related. Red-tailed boas get let loose a lot too. They're very commonly kept as pets and very commonly released. Um, uh, if you see something, say something. If you see something like this, let me know. It's something that we want to make sure we remove from the park or the preserve for the animals' own good, but also for the good of the native creatures that live there. Now, I know I promoted this last week, but I wanted to just give you a reminder that this coming Saturday, November 6th, from 9 a.m. till noon, we'll be collecting pumpkins over at the St. Charles Public Works facility. Um, the only thing they ask is that there's if you have any decorations like if sequins glitter or if there's a candle inside, make sure you remove that before you bring it by. The pumpkins will be composted at a commercial facility and they'll be used to enrich um, soils in a lot of different places. They will also save this sort of material from going to the landfill. Just like what I was talking about with my own home composting, putting a lot of organic stuff that could be broken down and put to use elsewhere, putting that in a landfill just really wastes it. And in the case of pumpkins, they're finding that their decomposition really adds a lot of methane to the air, which isn't a good thing either. So, uh, um, if you can help pass that word along, I'd greatly appreciate it. Now, I'm going to stop the screen share because I've got something else I want to share with you. It's a season not just for pumpkins, but for this stuff here. Oh, hold on. Let's do some questions first. Um, Glad to hear that, Miss Amanda. I will play the theme song every week. People who've been tuning in for a while, they know that. They're probably sick of it. Is there any rhyme or reason to the different fall leaf colors of the different tree species? Yeah, good question, Jerry. Yes. So different types of trees have different um, uh, types of concentrations of sugars in the leaves. Some leaves will are known for producing a yellow color, which is caused by the carotenes in the leaf, and it's really what's there when the chlorophyll itself fades away. Um, some leaves, though, when there's sugars that are trapped, when that abscission layer forms, there's some sugars that are left in the leaf, and that can cause the production of another pigment, um, the anthocyanins, which are the reds and the purples. So some species are known to do that. So um, like our, I was just looking at a shagbark hickory the other day, and their leaves turn this really wonderfully golden, almost bronzed yellow color. Um, I don't think there's really anything like it in our woods. A lot of our maples or sugar maples go ablaze with sort of a yellowish color, but then we've got the hybrid maples. I know up and down the street here in St. Charles, it's a hybrid tree that doesn't produce a lot of seeds and a lot of waste, but it produces a wonderful fall color. So a lot of species kind of have a range of colors that they produce, and you can, by looking at what trees are producing these different colors, you can start to learn what to expect. Um, you can learn your tree identification by looking at the colors that they make in the fall. Hope that helps. Um, Diane wants to know, do the gypsy moth egg masses go all the way up the tree trunk? They go all the way, they go as far as the females. Um, so if we look at that, consider that life cycle, the um, caterpillars hatch out in the spring and they want to migrate up to the leaves. Um, and they feed and they feed and they feed. Now, when they produce when they go into their pupal stage, which I did have some here on my desk, but I don't think I do at the moment. That can be up high or that can be down low. Um, I found them on different parts of the tree. But when the moth emerges, the female is flightless and the male flies. So um, she's going to move around a little bit on the tree. Um, I know that there are masses that I can see on this burr out in front, but I can't reach them. And that's where our old custodian, who's moved to Florida now, he had attached was it a knife? But it was something that he would use to scrape off the egg masses that he couldn't reach. It wasn't a sharp knife. I want to say it was more like a table knife, but he would use that to knock them down and catch them in his bucket. He also would get a ladder out and scrape as well. I think they do go pretty high up, so trying to get them all might be a bit of a I guess it depends on how good of a tree climber you are, Diane. But yeah, I think they can go up pretty high on the branches of the trees.
Yeah, Pam, so they do go on the branches too then.
Yeah, yeah, they
So,
do.
yeah.
So
So if
yeah,
you have a big tree, you're asking a lot then to get.
yes,
Okay.
yes, we are, and well, and that's where I don't know, because for a long time the state was saying, oh, if you see, call this number if you find gypsy moths, we want to report them so that we can start to treat them. And the last couple of times I called, they said, yeah, 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 we know you've got them in Kane County, and that's it. Um, Many years ago, they were doing the aerial applications in the spring. Of the BT, the bacteria that will stop the growth of the caterpillar at that stage. The problem with that is that it does get what's up in the tops of the trees, but it gets all caterpillars. It's not specific to gypsy moths.
Mm.
So yeah, and now there are like birds like blue jays are actually known to feed on caterpillars that are fuzzy like that. Blue jays will eat gypsy moths, and they'll also eat eastern tent caterpillars. So there might be a little bit of natural control that occurs there too. But
Mm.
um, I think what Wisconsin was saying was the more we can scrape off, the fewer we'll have to deal with. But even they accept that we're not going to be able to get them all through these manual methods.
And
Um,
what trees, Pam, I asked that question about, is it just the oaks or is it,
it
I've got
seems to
so many
be,
different trees.
yeah, they really do like oaks. That's where we're seeing them in the woods at Hickory Knolls too, is on our bur oak and white oak trees. The bur oaks almost seem to offer them a little bit of an advantage because there's the deep crevices
Hmm.
that they can, climb in and hide out in. But they do feed. I've even seen up north. I've seen them on some of the pine trees up there.
Nice.
So,
What about spruce? Spruces,
um, I don't know about spruce. I
crab
would
trees, spruces.
tend to think
Yeah.
not. I would say look on their hardwoods first.
Okay.
Um,
Because we've got, and red buds, we got lots of red buds. I
Yeah,
haven't seen.
I've not seen them on redbuds either. But
Okay.
again, I haven't seen every redbud. I
Yeah.
think in maybe in an area of heavy infestation, they might be going wherever they can, but I know they have a definite preference for hardwoods. And I was doing a program, this was several years ago now, I would say more than 5 years over at Haynes, and there's a red oak outside of Haynes School that had gypsy moths on it. So, red oak or white oak family or group, they don't seem to, some creatures will avoid red oak for white oak or white oak for red oak, but these guys go for all the oaks, it seems.
I just looked it up, Pam, and it's a Canadian site, but it said that they prefer, excuse me, broadleaf trees, mainly red and white oak, poplar, and white birch.
There we go. All right. Thanks, Diane.
Thanks. Yeah, I've seen them
You're
on the
welcome.
white birch.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, best you can do to get after them, the better.
Yeah.
Good luck. Because, yeah, even out here, I've contemplated going out on the porch. We spend a lot of time here in Park District land getting schooled on safety, and I can't imagine, how many rules I'd be breaking by standing on the porch trying to, you know, save the oak tree. But on the other hand, I'd be trying to save the oak tree. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do that on a day when I'm the only one here. Oh, and then John, hey, what happens to the methane when pumpkin is composted? So it depends on the landfill. It might be captured in a methane containment. Then they have those pipes that burn the excess methane off. You might maybe have seen that on some landfills where that is getting burned off, but some of it is released into the atmosphere, and you know everybody blames cows for releasing methane and contributing to the greenhouse gases, but it can also happen with our landfills as well. So the and pumpkins are so easy to compost that the more of these collection sites that spring up, the more we can keep these pumpkins out of the landfills. They also they're really heavy, so if you have a trash collection system, like I know here at the park district, we're not charged by the bag or by the dumpster. It's by the weight of what the tip is. So putting a lot of pumpkins in a garbage can is going to make it way more. And depending on how your city's waste contract was negotiated, it could actually cost you more too. So I just and I find I don't know if I'm well, we all know I'm quirky, but this is another quirk I've found that I've developed over time is I really can't throw something organic in a garbage can anymore. Just like I can't throw an aluminum can in the garbage, it has to somehow crunch it. I'll put it in my pocket. I'll wait till I can find a recycling bin for it. Um, I will eat an apple here at work, and I pack the apple core up and I bring it home with me. The banana peel comes home with me. Um, yeah, I know it's probably only going to get worse as I get older, but all those things they can be made back into soil, so I try to do that as much as I can. So, with that, we just got actually we're after 9 o'clock, but I started after 8, so I still get another minute or two here. I wanted to show you these. It is that time of year again, and it's this is a fruit, I guess you'd call it, that I have had a fascination with since I was a little kid. Down on my mom's family's farm, they called them hedge apples. Up here, they're often called Osage oranges, but they are just a cool little. Oh, and monkey brains. A lot of kids call them monkey brains, but this is a cool fruit of a tree that's unfortunately not considered native to this part of the country, but they were planted widely. The plant that this comes from, the Osage orange tree, it's a tree that's got a really rot resistant and very long lasting wood to it. Farmers found that it was a lot easier to plant Osage orange trees than it was to create fencing to keep their cattle in. The tree, besides the strong wood, it's also got thorns on it, so it was very good at keeping cattle contained. Um, the name Osage orange refers to the Osage River region of the country, which is down in what is that, Kansas, Oklahoma, in that area. The Osage, in fact, the Osage uh, indigenous tribe would use the wood from these trees to make the bows for their arrows. I think they made other tools from them too. They taught the settlers of the area about the usefulness of that wood. Um, the other cool thing about this plant is these fruits are called ecological anachronisms because they've lost their connection to dispersal agents. Every plant it needs to spread its seeds around for the good of the species. So some berries have a fleshy fruit that attract birds. The birds eat the berry and deposit the seed elsewhere. Um, some plants, like say American lotus, coconuts, which aren't native, but they disperse their seeds by floating them away. Um, this tree, it's thought, was the seeds were dispersed by mastodons and other megafauna that go back to the Ice Age. And when those megafauna went away, this tree lost that main dispersal mechanism or agent of those large animals. Now, because of its useful qualities, it hasn't suffered at all because people have spread it around. There's several different fence row areas that I can think of where these grow, and They're also known, it does have a an interesting odor to it. I wouldn't call it pleasant, but I wouldn't call it unpleasant. A lot of websites will tell you if you put these in your house, it'll keep away spiders. And I always wonder, why would you want to do that? But if you do, you could give this a try. I do have, actually, I've got several in a bucket here that I picked up. These were clogging up a storm sewer in Geneva. Um, so I brought them in and I wanted to show them to you. There actually are some seeds in here that you can eat, but this fruit has such a sticky sort of sap inside of it that extracting the small seeds, which are just a little bit bigger than a sunflower kernel, and they the taste of them reminds me of sunflower kernels that are unsalted and not roasted either, so they're kind of soft. But you can eat the seeds, but it's a lot of work for a very minimal culinary experience. But they're cool. They look nice in a bowl as a decorative element, and you know what? You can compost them. So anyway, just wanted to let you know that it's Osage orange, aka hedge apple season. Keep an eye out for them. They're fun and they're free. Most people want you to take them away. Well, folks, that's all I have for you tonight. If does anybody have any questions or comments?
One minor question.
Oh, hey, Jerry.
Composting.
Yeah,
Do you throw stuff in your compost even in the winter? I get very lazy.
I do. Well, see, mine. Yeah, I do too. So I have. We started the program with my klutziness. We'll end it with a story about klutziness too. I had a crock pot. Well, I have a crock pot, and I was transferring potatoes into. I was going to make mashed potatoes and keep them warm in the crock pot. This was Thanksgiving a few years ago. Well, I boiled the potatoes in a big heavy pot, and as I was transferring them, I kind of let it slip out of my hand, and I cracked my crock pot. So uh, can't use it for food anymore, but I glued the big chunk that came off. I glued it back on and I used that underneath my sink. So that's where the coffee grounds and things like that go. And it takes, I live by myself, so it takes a while to fill that up. But I do that in the winter and then I do take it out. And I'll, um, because it's got the bungee corded lid, I can still roll it. It's only a very few times that it's actually been frozen to the ground where I can't move it around. So yeah, I put stuff in there all year. I do try to clean it out about this time of year because there's still time to spread it out. Um, but in the winter time, I don't like to spread it out on top of snow. So I try to get it down to maybe a third to a quarter full. And then that leaves me space to fill it up over the course of the winter.
Oh, that's a clever solution. Thank you.
Oh, I try. I'm clumsy, but sometimes clever too.
Right. Clumsy can pay.
I have a helpful hint from Heloise.
Oh, yes.
I
Yes,
use
please.
one of those plastic coffee cans under my sink to hold all the compost before I take it out because it's sealed,
It
it's
seals,
airtight,
yeah.
and the fruit flies can't get in there. So
And you don't have to
plastic
waste a
coffee
crock
can.
pot.
I hate
Good.
coffee, but I steal the coffee cans from my parents.
Good idea, Dr. Sarah. Yeah, that's a good idea too. That sealing, especially if you've got some of the like grapefruit rinds and banana peels and things like that. You're right, they can produce fruit flies even in the middle of winter. Oh, and Greg and Kelly, they have a sealed container underneath too. So, yeah, those are all good options for you too, Jerry. And you can always bring those questions to this group as we go through the cold weather composting months. Um, with that, folks, it looks like we are out of time. We're over time and um, out of questions. So, with that, I'll say goodnight for tonight and hope we see you back again next week. Have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Pam.
Good night, Pam.
Thank you,
See you guys.
Pam.
Good night. Ah, there we go. Ah, one more.